Recently, I was just flying back from Bangalore along with my younger daughter. We had gone on a small holiday. And since Bangalore Delhi is a little longer flight, say 2.5 hour flight, so she had already downloaded her movie and saved it because that's how she's going to kill time during the flight. And the flight took off. I was doing my own bit and she was busy watching a movie. And it so happened that after 1 hour into the flight, I could see she was all jumpy. And then when I looked at her, I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Dad, my battery got over." And there's no battery bank also. I said, "See, I'm not also carrying any battery bank." I knew the problem was she was watching a movie and the movie was about to end. And at that moment, her phone died. So she was just a little curious, little anxious about the sense of incompleteness. Now imagine it's the same with answers also. If you don't end your answers, if you don't conclude your answers, the examiner will also feel the same. So that's why ending matters. So learn to conclude your answers also. It's not about starting, it's also about closing. It's not about opening an innings in T20 matches, it's about closing of the matches also. Learn to finish. Just imagine you run a marathon. If you don't finish, who remembers you? So close. And when you come to answer writing, it's not about introductions, it's not about body, it's also about giving a proper conclusion. And conclusions are always a tough thing for one simple reason, because one, you have an anxiety to close, you have an anxiety to finish because you're watching the clock. That's one. Second problem we have is, like, most of us keep thinking, okay, how should I end? Should I use a conclusion? Should I just summarize it? How should I end my answer? So don't worry, we are here to help. Concluding answers, let's simplify them. Let's start by understanding what exactly are conclusions. Conclusions are the last few lines or the last paragraph of the answer. This is where you close your answer. When I say closing your answer, that means either you're summarizing or either you're justifying, but last few sentences. And these last few sentences will matter. Why? Because this is where you're leaving a lasting impressions on the examiner. And just look at the whole answer from examiner's perspective. Suppose if I am an examiner, I am reading the answer. As I finish reading the introduction, then the main part of your answer, then when I am reading your conclusions, that is where I will start thinking in terms of giving you marks. So once I finish reading your conclusions, I will give you marks. So what I last remember is reading those conclusions. So that's why conclusions will matter. And conclusions are your last chance to leave a lasting impression. So that is why watch out for conclusions. I'm sure some of you must be wondering why I'm focusing so much on conclusion. The reason is, one, conclusion is a place where you close your answer, you justify your position, or you give a summary of the entire argument. Second, it refreshes the line of argument that you have taken in the answer. It makes it easy for the examiner. In fact, it recalls your line of argument for the examiner. And the third one is about, that's a last point where you can actually assert yourself again. Because you're closing your answer, so you can be a little assertive, you can show your point of view again, you can assert yourself there. So these are three reasons why I'm focusing so much on conclusion. Now that we've understood the meaning of the word conclusion, what conclusions are all about, and why conclusion is so important, let's look at the way to conclude. Let's explore different strategies of concluding the answer. And when I say concluding an answer, it entirely depends on the demand of the question. And if you can understand the demand of the question, your conclusion strategy is very clear. For example, some questions will demand you to justify. These are called argumentative questions. In such questions, the conclusion should focus on justifying a certain argument. On the other side, there are some questions which are more descriptive or explanatory. In such questions, the conclusion should focus on giving a single line summary. So your conclusion strategies completely rely on the demand of the question. So simple. You understand the demand of the question, you conclude accordingly. Whenever we talk about strategies to conclude, the most easiest and the simplest and the traditional way of concluding is single line summaries. And I'm very sure most students are very familiar with this because most of us do that only. Summarize whatever is mentioned above. Summarize the key points. It's easy. Now let's take a few previous year's questions. In 2016, please listen to the questions carefully. In 2016, explain how ethics contributes to social and human well-being. The word here is explain. 2019, discuss the role of ethics and values in enhancing the following three major components of comprehensive national power. That is human, capital, soft power, and social harmony. The key word is discuss. 2016, how could social influence and persuasion contribute to the success of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan? The key word is how. 2022, what do you understand by the term good governance? How far have recent initiatives in terms of e-governance steps taken by the state have helped beneficiaries? Discuss with suitable examples. The keywords are what and discuss. If you look at all the keywords, if you look at it, it talks about what, how, discuss, explain. Now these are not argumentative questions. These are questions where you are expected to explain something or describe something. And whenever you come across such a question, single line summaries are the best because you're not taking a position. You just explain something, you're summarizing it. But the only trick is you cannot repeat the same words that you used in the above paragraphs, in the main body. Just rephrase it, paraphrase it, give one single sentence summary. So single sentence summaries work very well with explanatory questions. I have a tip for all of you. The moment you see the word describe, explain, discuss, how and what, that means go with single line summaries. It's the most easiest and you cannot go wrong there. Trust me, it works. Besides single line summaries, what I advise students is learn to use quotations also to conclude answers. I know quotations can be used wonderfully in introductions, but let's be creative here. We can always use quotes to end. For example, quotes are a very useful way to conclude answers to justificatory questions, questions where you have to justify a certain position, or questions which are more argumentative. Now this is where you can use quotations wonderfully. For example, in 2013, there was a question. It is often said that politics and ethics do not go together. What is your opinion in this regard? Justify your answer with illustration. The key word is justify. 2021. Integrity is a value that empowers human being. Justify with suitable illustration. The key word again is justify. So whenever you see a question that expects you to justify or evaluate or which expects you to take a position, I repeat, take a position. Now these are questions where you can use quotations very easily. I'm sure when I say quotation, there are a lot of wonderful quotations or wonderful statements made by philosophers or leaders or thinkers, and I'm sure you read about them in your history books. You can use them to close your answers. So please remember, in some questions which are more argumentative or evaluative questions, try to use quotes to conclude your answers. Next, quotations can also be a wonderful source of conclusion in questions dealing with values and virtues. For example, in the year 2013, we had this quotation of Aristotle. I count him braver who overcomes his desires than him who overcomes his enemies. 2030. Now this was a quotation dealing with self-control. In 2021, UPSC had this question. We can never obtain peace in the outer world until and unless we obtain peace within ourselves. Now this is a quotation that deals with inner peace. So if you look at both the quotations, one dealt with virtue of self-control, one dealt with the value of peace. Now these are questions where you can use a quote to conclude your point of view. So what I'm trying to tell you here is, quotations make wonderful conclusions in justificatory or evaluative questions and questions dealing with virtues and values. As of now, we explored single line summaries and using quotations to conclude. Now let's get on to the third one. The other way of concluding an answer is referring to eminent personalities or historical figures, because there will be some questions on values or virtues where actually you can use these eminent personalities to conclude. For example, in the year 2020, there was this Mahatma Gandhi's quotation: "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in service of others." This quotation completely revolves around the value of service. And to conclude an answer to this quotation, the best conclusion would have been referring to Acharya Vinoba Bhave. Everybody knows him because we would have read about him in Bhudan movement in your modern Indian history classes. So that's why there will be some questions where it actually makes sense to refer to historical personalities to conclude your answers. But only advice I have is, the personality should be reflective of that value or that virtue. If you're not able to connect that personality with the value that is mentioned in the quotation or in the question, or the virtue which is mentioned in the question, then the conclusion will not be aligned to what is being asked in the question. So watch out for that. Now here's a pro tip. Avoid using the same personality in multiple places. Suppose you had used the personality as an introduction in some other question. Don't repeat them in conclusions. Let's consider the following questions from previous years. In the year 2014, we had this question: all humans aspire for happiness. Do you agree? What does happiness mean to you? Explain with examples. The key phrase here is, do you agree? Let's move to 2019. One more question. Emotional intelligence is the ability to make emotions work for you instead of against you. Do you agree with this view? Discuss. The key phrase is, do you agree? Let's move on to 2020. One more question. Hatred is destructive of a person's wisdom and conscience that can poison a nation's spirit. Do you agree with this view? Justify your answer. If you look at all the three questions, there's one common phrase: do you agree? And whenever someone asks you, do you agree, it's a straightforward yes-no question. Either you say yes or either you say no. You cannot take a middle path. And I know taking a stance is very, very difficult. We find it tough to say yes or no, even at homes also. For example, if you come to my place, being a good host, I will offer you coffee or Pepsi. You have to make a choice, either coffee or Pepsi. But what most kids do is, they'll say, "Sir, kuch bhi, anything will work." Boss, I am asking you either coffee or Pepsi. I don't have anything at home. These two are the only options. It's the same here also. UPSC is asking you, do you agree? Yes is the option or no is the option. Pick one. So these are questions where the conclusion should reflect your yes or no. I know it's difficult. And let me tell you something, in ethics there's no middle path. Either you're right or either you're wrong. Dowry, right or wrong. You cannot say it's a blessing. There's no middle path here. So learn to take a stance. And these are questions, do you agree kind of questions are questions where you have to take a stance, where you have to take a position. Either you are on the agreeing side or either you are on the disagreeing side. Oh, let me give you a pro tip. I know saying yes or no on the face is very harsh. Some of you will have apprehensions about it. So what you can do is you can straight away write, I concur with the above position. Put it across politely, softly, I concur with the above position. Or probably you can say, I have reservations about this idea. Polite, but it works. But you have to take a stance. So in do you agree kind of questions, the conclusion should reflect your position. Either you agree or you disagree. Let me give you a recap of the key ideas that we discussed in this video. First of all, when writing conclusions, always remember, conclusion should have a sense of closure. Because conclusion is the end, so it has to close properly. It should have a sense of closure, one. Second, please avoid such transitional phrases as to conclude, to summarize, or in short. Now these are phrases school kids use. This is UPSC exam, boss. Grow up. Write something sensible. Avoid such phrases. Third, please don't introduce any new ideas or arguments in conclusion, because conclusions are nothing but recalling of what you have written in the above paragraphs. So don't introduce anything new. Next, when concluding, don't repeat the same phrases that you used in the answer above. Just avoid repeating phrases. Next, please don't use the same personality again and again when you're concluding. And lastly, conclude assertively and positively. Trust me, this works. Follow us to learn more on GS-IV. Happy studying. Hope to see you soon.